Terence McKenna had a very funny thing that he said about science. He said, science wants you to believe that it's all about measurement and reason if you allow them one miracle. That one miracle is the Big Bang.
Yes.
That all things come from the most preposterous idea ever.
Yeah.
That everything came from nothing in one big miracle.
That's right. I completely
I totally
agree
paraphrased it.
I
he
love
probably
that.
said it far more eloquently.
Well,
but
this was for Fred Hoyle's objection to the Big Bang. He said he was a Democritean. He didn't believe. He said nothing comes from nothing, and I simply refuse to believe that the physical universe came from nothing physical. And moreover, he said it smacks of the Genesis account, which he detested, and so he rejected the Big Bang and formulated this steady state model that was later, I think, decisively refuted by the discovery of the cosmic background radiation. It happens. I've had funny coincidental meetings with Hoyle, Herman Bondi, and Thomas Gold, all three of the architects of the steady state model. I met Bondi and Hoyle when I was a PhD student in Cambridge. And Hoyle held on to his dying day for the steady state. But Bondi, actually, we had a conversation about it, and he said that it turned out that it was a brilliant idea. It was a beautiful idea, just that it turned out that everything about it was wrong, and he rejected it. So, but later, Hoyle had his own conversion to a kind of quasi-theistic worldview because of his discovery of the fine-tuning parameters. But the point is that the materialists did not expect to have this evidence from the beginning. Hoyle thought that the laws of physics were the first law of conservation of matter and energy. Matter and energy are neither created nor destroyed except at the Big Bang. And he didn't like that, but eventually I think the physics community came around. There were so many indicators of that beginning event.
Now, again, as we're discussing detection methods and our ability to understand things is so radically different from 1920, 100 years ago. What is it going to be like 100 years from now? Are we making assumptions based on very limited data? It's a lot of data for us, but it seems fairly limited given the scope of not just this universe, but then the concept of multiverses. Like, what are your thoughts of this concept of multiple universes?
I love to talk about the multiverse.
Or infinite universes.
Yeah, I'm glad you raised it. And this also connects to the Fred Hoyle story, which is fascinating. Again, with the proviso, science is necessarily provisional, and we always have to be open to new data.
Right.
But the trend lines, I think, are the things that are really interesting. So there's this Hoyle's. Let's start with Hoyle, and then we'll get to multiverse. Okay. So Hoyle is great astrophysicist. He's thinking about carbon, and he realizes that carbon has this unique property of being able to make long chain-like molecules, and long chain-like molecules therefore are capable of storing information, and we need information to build specified structures, in particular living systems. So he's trying to explain the abundance of carbon in the universe, and he thinks of 4 or 5 different ways that won't work, and finally he comes up with a way that would work. And long story short, it turns out for that way of building carbon chemically to work, it has to do with combining simpler what are called nucleons, smaller atoms to get the carbon molecule. There has to be a special resonance level for the carbon molecule, special way it sings. It has a certain energy level that causes it to sing at a certain frequency. Turns out the frequency he predicts, which would be necessary to explain the origin of carbon in the universe, exists within a particular form of carbon. And they determine this at Caltech. But then that turns out to be the tip of a deeper iceberg of a whole series of other things in the universe that would have to be just right to make this formation of carbon possible. The gravitational force would have to, inside stars, the gravity couldn't be too strong, too weak. The electromagnetic force couldn't be too strong or too weak. The ratio between them couldn't be too strong or too weak. Everything fell in this sweet spot, this kind of Goldilocks zone, where, and we now call this the phenomenon of fine tuning, that there are multiple parameters in the universe that fall within these very narrow tolerances, outside of which not only life would be impossible, but stable galaxies and even basic chemistry would be impossible. And so that is to say, even to get the evolutionary process going, you would have to have all these beautifully finely tuned parameters in place. And so Hoyle starts having a rethink about this, and he's a staunch atheist, scientific atheist materialist, but he ends up concluding that fine-tuning points to some kind of a fine-tuner. And he's quoted as saying that the best data we have suggests that a super intellect has monkeyed with physics and chemistry in order to make life possible. And so he moves to this sort of rudimentary theistic position in his philosophy or his worldview. Now, a lot of other physicists have come to the same conclusion. Sir John Polkinghorne, great Cambridge physicist, had a late-in-life conversion, religious conversion, that was partially predicated on his awareness as a physicist of the evidence for the universe as a setup job, the Goldilocks universe, as some physicists have called it. So that's kind of, as Hoyle said, a kind of common sense interpretation. When we see other systems that are finely tuned, like a French recipe or an internal combustion engine, what we mean by fine-tuning is an ensemble of improbable parameters that work together to accomplish some remarkable outcome or functional or remarkable outcome. That's what, if you see an internal combustion engine, you think it was engineered because it's finely tuned. So common sense. The contrary argument to that, the main one, there have been others, but not even most secular physicists regard them as compelling anymore. The main contrary argument has been the idea of the multiverse. That, yes, our universe has this array of jointly improbable parameters that are in that sweet spot. But we just happen to be the lucky one because there's a gabillion other universes out there. And with different combinations of the laws and constants of physics and different initial conditions at the beginning of those universes. So all those things that were just right in our universe are, yes, extremely improbable, but there's so many other universes that the probability of a universe with that set of life-friendly conditions arising somewhere had to arise somewhere, inevitably, and we just happen to be in that lucky universe. And then we are stunned by that, and they call that this observer selection effect. So that's superficially an equally plausible explanation to the fine-tuner argument. And a lot of physicists have told me that they regard the two as a wash. You can believe in a fine-tuner, or you could believe in a multiverse. I think the fine-tuner, we'll call it theistic design argument, provides a better overall explanation.